All right, looks like we got a good amount of people, so we can get started. Thanks everyone for joining and submitting all your questions. Please make sure to leave your mic muted if you're not talking so we don't get extra feedback. And this call will be recorded and shared afterwards. We have the usual Foam team members here. We're also joined by Harrison from Token Foundry. Harrison, do you want to introduce yourself and give a little overview of Token Foundry?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Harrison, founder of Token Foundry. So Token Foundry is the advisory arm of Consensus. So we help projects go through the process of tokenization, work with a lot of decentralized networks, but also work with Fortune 50 companies, go through the process, help design networks, tokens, structure the sales, the token supply, help with partnerships, dots within Consensus with the project, and a bunch of other things. We focus a lot on, especially in the last year, the regulatory side of token sales, and making sure that the way we launch networks and sell tokens is in a safe way and fair way that hopefully would mitigate the risk of tokens and projects running into regulatory trouble. So definitely happy to talk more about that for the context of this call. And if there's anything I left out, happy to expand on.
All right. Also want to mention that we're joined by Will too, who recently started helping out Foam. And Ryan, do you want to give a quick overview for any newcomers? Kind of short-term and long-term outlook for Foam?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for everyone who's coming and anyone who's joining us for the first time. As you may know, Foam is a spatial protocol. We're building location standards and spatial proofs for blockchain as kind of a horizontal infrastructure. And the project has kind of three main elements. One is called the cryptospatial coordinate. So how do we encode location standards into smart contracts? And the other is the spatial index visualizer. So how do we build front-end mapping-based decentralized tools? And both of those are general purpose. So we have a developer portal and anyone can use those to build spatial dApps. And kind of the third element is proof of location. So how do we actually know that what we see on the map or on the blockchain is where it says it is in the real world? And that's really rolling out in kind of two portions, what we call static proof of location and dynamic. Dynamic being things that move through time and space, and that will rely on hardware and this mining incentives and testing. But what we're launching with currently this summer is called static proof of location. So that's how do we curate points of interest, things that don't move on the map, and come to a social consensus on that. And we're using a token curated registry. So we have a token sale coming up on Token Foundry as part of these new consumer standards we've been working together to develop. And I'm sure we can speak more to that on this call. And they'll be launching with the static proof of location for curating the map. And users can basically serve as cartographers and interact with our platform that way, as well as build their own applications.
All right, and we recently launched our token page where you can find all the details you need to know about the utility of our token and a countdown to the registration period, as well as some overview on proof of work and how that will work.
Proof of use.
So, or proof of use, sorry. Harrison, you want to go a little more over that?
Sure. So proof of use was something we came up with as a way to deter just pure speculators and really focus on helping get token purchasers who are going to utilize the tokens and add value to the networks. So we came up with a way to do it trustlessly through smart contracts, where basically based on how many tokens someone would purchase in an initial sale or token generation event, there'd be a certain threshold of usage of those tokens that a buyer would have to prove before he would be able to resell any tokens he bought in the sale. So basically how it works, and let's say in this specific context where the initial functionality of the token would be to stake to add points of interest to a registry, if you bought a certain number of tokens, that will equate to a certain number of points of interest within ranges. So let's say if someone bought like 0 to 10,000 USD worth of tokens, they might have to stake, let's just make up numbers for easy explanation. But let's say it was 1 point of interest. And if it was 10,000 US dollars to 50,000 US dollars, that might be 5 points of interest, so on and so forth. So the purchasers of the tokens will just be required to stake the required number of points of interest or tokens to add those that equivalent number of points of interest to the staking contract before their tokens were able to be transferable out of the wallet that they used to purchase tokens in the sale. So really how it works in the smart contract is that we limit the addresses that tokens can be transferred to. So it'll basically say that when you buy these tokens, they can only be transferred from your wallet to the staking contract address until that threshold of proof of use is met based on the number of tokens purchased. And then once that threshold is met, all the tokens in that wallet become freely transferable forever. So it's just that initial proof of use threshold, and then these tokens are freely transferable like most all other tokens. And let me know if that wasn't clear or if I should add on any points.
No, that was great. Thank you. Ryan, you want to introduce some of the exact usage for the utility token and real world use cases?
Sure. I guess I'll just start going into the questions because I see the first question someone asked is, I'd like to hear the plan to create adoption of the utility of the token. And really our plan for creating adoption really starts with the sale. So just going off of how Harrison was describing the process of that we really want those who are going to be stakeholders and service cartographers and help build out the map to be the initial purchasers. And we're having essentially those who want to purchase tokens attest to that. And by going through this registration process, answering the questionnaire, and then ultimately the kind of first way to build out the map is that we have the purchasers be required to add points. So that's really like the first step towards us reaching full utility of the token, is that it will be functional at the time of launch, and we will require people to build it out to start. So that's before tokens are liquid or movable. We're already going to have a robust kind of registry of points that could be challenged, added stakes to, voted on, etc. Yeah, so there's a bunch of questions people asked before while registering, so I'll run through those quickly and then can return to the questions coming up in the chat, and we can hopefully have more of a open discussion. Everyone can feel free to speak as well, as opposed to just chatting. But the next question is, what's the fundamental utility of the protocol having its own token? So really, we think of it as for a few reasons. One, we want to have around a specific protocol, one specific monetary policy that's not tied to other assets like Ethereum. And because we want to then have a protocol that's tokenized, it means people can become stakeholders in that protocol by buying those tokens. So just there is a reason why we want to have an individual token. And because of that, we can design our own kind of cryptographic rules and incentives just around Foam as a protocol, kind of separated from any other assets like Ethereum or the fluctuations or prices there. And the value of that token then and how it's used and how many people own it will serve to represent the value of just the Foam network. So that's why we chose to have our own token. And the fundamental utility for both that static and dynamic proof of location will be basically staking value to location data. And that over time, the more of these tokens that are locked up in either points of interest or being staked as zone anchors, the more scarcer the token will become, and the more value the network effects can drive the token value up, but that value will be locked in the map. And that's how we have this then consensus-driven map that will be backed by this one monetary policy, this one token, and become a central source of truth that any other app could build off of. I'll just jump around through the questions. The next question is, how is the sale actually conducted? Token distribution and using alternative tokens within the protocol. So for the actual sale, we'll only be taking contributions in Ether. The sale is conducted on the Token Foundry platform, which we have Harrison here as a founder and representative of Token Foundry. And so the first step is you first need to just make a KYC account on Token Foundry. We'll be making a webinar to go through these steps prior to the sale. And once then July 16th begins, which is the foam registration, you'll have to answer foam specific questions and basically put in the amount that you're looking to purchase. And we will review your application and send you back an email with a whitelisted code, so that when the sale opens July 31st, you'll have a week to send in your contribution to purchase the tokens. And so we definitely expect that it will go pretty smooth, but some people may have issues, so we'll be available basically on call, on Telegram, or email for any issues people have with registration. I'm just going to switch to some of the questions in the chat. So someone's asking how the IoT Alliance will help foam, or how we can give back to the IoT Alliance. Well, we're founding members of the IoT Alliance, so we're really happy to be part of that initiative. And what we're really bringing to the table is secure location. So in IoT, everyone's talking about how they can buy and sell this data really easily, but no one's really bringing up data provenance. Are those devices where they say they are? So we're going to be bringing those standards and working with the organization. And there's already been a grant given out with a group of academics in London testing LoRa radios with actually the Quantum blockchain, because Quantum was giving a grant to the Trusted IoT Alliance. So we could imagine in the future foam as well, offering grants through the Alliance to have people test different hardware and devices. And so just generally another question was, how can I become a cartographer? So for that, you need foam tokens, and the best way to obtain them is to participate in the sale that's about to occur if you want to serve as a cartographer. So if you can refer back to the steps we were just describing, and any other questions, happy to answer. Anyone have any other questions they want to bring up, or I can go back to the pre-list? Can you tell us more about proof of use? Yeah, so as we were describing, the proof of use is designed to essentially prove the purchasers are able to use the token, and also that the token is functional and working. We're going to announce the final numbers before the sale of those thresholds of how many points you would need to use. But essentially, once the token is launched, we'll have this 45-day period where the tokens are only usable into the foam contracts, not transferable outside of foam. And you'll be able to create a new point, challenge existing points, or vote. However, the only way to satisfy proving use in this case will be adding a new point to the map. And for that, you have the minimum deposit. You can reference the mainnet preview that we sent of how you create those points, and we'll serve more on that as well. And so that's really about how you're proving use to be a cartographer. After that 45-day period, the app is fully decentralized and unlocked, and there's also the signaling functionality. So you're able to deposit tokens into locations to incentivize the testing of the hardware and increase the future mining rewards. So that's kind of all the functionality that'll exist at the beginning. We'll have more details, specifics on the proof of use in terms of numbers and technical descriptions of how to use different wallets to achieve proof of use prior to the sale. So the next question is from Nick C. is what radio devices are used and how many tokens are needed to become a cartographer? So to become a cartographer, you just need a few tokens. Like the minimum deposit to add a point will be 1, but you're probably going to want more tokens to be able to challenge and vote in different points. So that's going to be up to you to decide how many you want to purchase, but we will be providing guidelines on different tiers of use of what we recommend. In terms of then the radio or the dynamic proof of location, that's not part of the launch. We're launching with the functionality for static proof of location and being cartographers. But in parallel, we are finalizing our testing of these first round of hardware and this ABCI Tendermint application, and we'll be releasing those specifications this summer so people can participate in testing. The hardware of the protocol is radio agnostic, but we're currently using a radio called LoRa because it's cheap, accessible, it has a global community already, and it's fairly dynamic for what we needed for. Although, yeah.
Hey, Ryan, this is Joe Landon. Got a quick question.
Sure.
So I'm curious about the cryptospatial coordinates. Are the locations on the map, are they fixed locations on a fixed map, and then you're tracking moving objects in relation to those fixed places, or are there moving locations or something? Is the object that's moving also have a coordinate?
Yeah, so the cryptospatial coordinate is just a way to encode location information, and it can be for any smart contract. So even outside of Foam, it can be a CryptoKitty wants to just claim a location. It can be an IoT device that just want to claim a location. In the context then of static proof of location, people have the ability to challenge those claims to locations, and that's just static points on a map. You can test the beta is currently on beta.foam.space running on the Rinkeby test network to get a sense of what that looks like. And then the dynamic proof of location will be about consensus on things through time and space that are moving around. And what they will want to do is purchase what we call presence claims, a fraud-proof attestation about themselves. And when they purchase that presence claim or try to speak back about to the zones, they'll apply a CSC to that claim as well. So the cryptospatial coordinate really is just like this primitive that can be applied to any contract in like all different contexts.
Cool, thanks.
So there's another question in the chat about challenging points of interest. Do you need to have more tokens than the number of ones used by the curator? So to challenge a point, you need to have the equal amount that the person staked. So if the minimum is 1, but a person applied with the Empire State Building of 100, but they put it in California, you would need 100 tokens to initiate the challenge against them. And then people can vote, and that voting would contribute to the total pool that could be distributed to you if you win. So if you then won that challenge, you would win a % of the total tokens at stake. The next question is, what kind of use cases or dApps do we hope to be built on the platform? We definitely want to empower users to come up with that themselves. We're pretty excited about some of the first teams building on Foam. One is called Spacer Network, which is an augmented reality, non-fungible token-based dApp platform where you can build games, and they're using the cryptospatial coordinate and spatial index visualizer, and will ultimately use proof of location. We have teams working on shared workspaces, one called Workspace 0x, as well as Map dApp for tracking images spatially. So those are some cool projects to start. We have some tutorial applications of like a parking DAO on our developer portal, and we really hope to inspire the imagination of the community to build really exciting apps. The next question was, how far are we from creating an SDK or API? So our API is currently available now. You can go to developer.foam.space to access the spatial index visualizer API, see sample applications and walkthroughs on how to get started building that yourself. Voting, you have to spend tokens to vote. It's a minimum of 1, and it's up to you to spend how many else you want. The next question is, regarding the chicken and egg problem, how do you plan to grow both developers and cartographer community? Do you plan to focus on specific areas? So for a lot of that, it's going to be driven by the community and the market. As you can see, we already have 20 global communities and Telegram groups, as well as on our heat map, a wide area of places where people are claiming to be cartographers. So that's really going to be driven by those stakeholders and who's buying the token. That will really drive where the map is being filled out first. But we do have a signaling function. So if there are areas not being mapped out or tested on, people can always stake there to incentivize people to use those locations. So we won't ourselves be dictating where mapping starts. That'll be up to the stakeholders of the community. But we will be growing the developer community in parallel through hackathons and continued API tools. And I'm not sure to what extent they're going to overlap. I see a question here specifically for Katya, if you're here, Katya, about how Foam intersects with architecture in the city. So I'll let Katya speak to that.
Right, so I was just posting in the local Russian chat. Can you describe where and how Foam intersects with architecture, city planning, and how foam can generally improve current pain points. I think that could be really great for urban planning, to create the kind of like the more active database where people are more incentivized to create more valuable points of interest. As we know right now, the main source of points of interest, like Foursquare, is like big on the market, where like people check in like different business restaurants. But in foam, we believe with this incentive structure, people will be adding more valuable data to the map. And I think that right now the contemporary urban planning research is using a lot of social media data to plan, for example, public spaces or any other kind of like city facilities. And I think, and that data is really hard to like consume or go through. I think something adding more weight to the information, have like more robust curation process, can create very like a significant and like valuable database for the urban planning and for the development of the cities. Sorry, it was an unexpected question.
Okay, I'm gonna just jump back into some of the more questions in the chat. One is asking, will Ethereum scaling issues affect dynamic proof of location? So the answer is like yes and no, in that Foam has its own scaling solution for dynamic proof of location. You can read more about the draft ideas in our technical white paper found at the end of the product paper and on our GitHub. But ultimately, every single zone will be running. The proof of location takes kind of three kinds of consensus, which is synchronous, partially synchronous, and asynchronous. So we have local zones running a synchronous protocol over radio, and that's purely just over radio. But then each zone anchor needs to kind of share a state machine and log that information. And we're using a partially synchronous consensus algorithm called Tendermint. So each zone is kind of like its own blockchain with instant finality. But to basically participate in that zone as a zone anchor, you first need to then stake on a root chain, and you could imagine that as Ethereum. And that's where the ultimate punishments and rewards occur. And we're using like a plasma construction for that. So you're staking on this root chain to get access to running this local zone. And so that's an active area of research of how we are connecting the two. But we would be relying on Ethereum for its like ultimate security features as a proof of work chain where the final states live. So we're not that concerned about scaling for dynamic proof of location because each kind of zone will be its own child chain.
Can't get any audio. Bummer. I've got video, but I can't get any audio. I don't
I'll send
know
you
why.
some chats in DM, Craig, to try and get you going.
I don't think he can hear us.
Okay, I'm just gonna keep going through the questions. Someone asked when we're gonna liquidate the 25% of the foam supply. We don't have plans to liquidate it. Partially, there's a company reserve, and the others are meant for our partners, employees, and advisors. All of those have like 3-year vesting schedules. We ultimately have a vision to open a foundation similar to the Zcash Foundation, like a US-based entity. They're currently a Delaware charity, although that's something that would take some time to set up, and we would be doing after the sale, and we would be transferring some of the reserve to that entity as well. The next question is, when seeking to add points of interest, what kinds of real-world locations are ideal? Well, that's really up to the stakeholders of the map to decide and the curators. I would imagine myself, just like restaurants, businesses, landmarks, parks, secret spots, places you want people to know about, all are valid points that could be added, but that will really be decided by the curators. Someone says they saw in the Telegram chat, someone mentioned Cardano. Are there any plans? I think Cardano is a bit early. They don't have a virtual machine at the moment, just a transaction layer. We have a recent developer joining us who's on the call, Jens, who had experience working on Cardano. Our team is full of Haskell developers, so we're definitely interested in that project, but we're of the opinion that Ethereum is the only functionally deployed blockchain that is really usable at the scale that we wanted to be able to launch even static proof of location. And the question from Decentralized Dan, how will Foam be affected when Ethereum is not proof of work and it's proof of stake? As I was explaining in the previous question, we rely on kind of a root chain staking mechanism. And if that chain is proof of work, but then becomes proof of stake, if it still has the same security features or even better ones, that works great for Foam. But we can choose to use a different root chain if we wanted to. That was still a proof of work one. Someone's asking to clarify if we've had a pre-sale. We didn't have a pre-sale. We had a seed investment round that closed last September with the option for equity or tokens. We're very happy to have those supporters in that seed round. But in that investment round, there was no promise of there ever being a token sale. And our protocol was quite immature at the time, so we hadn't specified any details about a pre-sale at that time because we weren't sure how the protocol would shape up. Paul's asking about info about device clock drift, like how long will it take for things to reset. That's going to be a function of the radios and the clocks. So the time synchronization protocol works up to 1 clock tick, and that'll then be determine how accurate and precise that is based on how accurate the network clocks are. So you could have a zone anchors with atomic clocks, and they basically never need to resynchronize. And then you could have a bunch of Raspberry Pis with local CPU clocks, and they might have to be resynchronizing every few seconds. So that's really going to be a function of the hardware, and we're trying to find an optimal solution, but we need the stakeholders like yourself to help test that out to figure out those kinds of latency answers. Someone asks if we can speak about the user experience for the points of interest. And I can say, yeah, if you're able to test our current beta is running on the Rinkeby network, that's beta.foam.space. That gives a preview of the basically architecture of the spatial index, and you can add just basic dummy points to that. And that's kind of a way to interact and get yourself used to the protocol now. I'm posting in the chat a link to the mainnet preview of actually how to create points and challenge them looks like. And part of the reason we have this 45-day no transfer restriction after the token sale is so that purchasers have time to familiarize themselves with the interface, work on the app, and not have these concerns of price fluctuations or trading, that they can really just test out being cartographers and users. And we'll definitely be posting more mainnet previews prior to the launch as well. So I see a few more questions I'll try to get to. If not, people can feel free to ask more or speak altogether. The last question I currently see is someone's asking if I'm creating a lot of locations in my city and it costs me a token, what benefit do I get from doing that? And I mean, that's a good question. And that's a question really around the incentives of TCRs. And we don't think the answer is that obvious, but the benefits are kind of one-off loaded. So one, if you're contributing valid points to the map, you're helping increase the value of the protocol and the map. Further, you locking up tokens that you still own but are kind of out of circulation increases the scarcity of the token. And so as the map becomes more valuable and more smart contracts and dApps need to reference these valid points, the more useful the map becomes, the more valuable the token becomes. And so if you had 100 tokens and you added 10 points, it may be worth it because the rest of your tokens that you use for signaling or something else have gone up in value due to your work of contributing to the map. So it's really like an offsetted value of adding work to the map. And we see people doing that today already for free with like OpenStreetMaps. There's millions of changes a week. And here we don't want to pay people to do the work, but we want skin in the game economics. So if you want to add something to the map, you have to put down a stake to say, I know this is true. And I'm willing to be challenged because I think this is a valid point. So I don't see any current other questions. If anyone has anything they want to bring up, or feel free to chat over the mic. If not, we can begin to wrap up and maybe return to see the final question: how can foam be used for fog, edge, cloud level computing? I spoke to this a little bit earlier of our work in the Trusted IoT Alliance, but we really think foam will be useful for data provenance and attesting that the devices are actually on the edge of where they say they are. And having those networks be able to have time synchronization and localize themselves is super important. We're speaking to companies that come to speak to us here at the new lab where we're based, such as HP and Intel, and they have a lot of issues with their edge computing. Next question is, if I add items to the map and I'm challenged and I lose my tokens, do I get them back? If I stake my tokens, can I get my tokens back? So if you're challenged and you lose the challenge, you lose your tokens. So that's essentially the skin in the game. But if you just staked to the point and you were approved, let's say you staked 100 tokens and then you realize you didn't want to stake that much anymore, you could withdraw your tokens or majority of them, but that then increases your visibility on the map. So we have this like ranking aspect based on zoom level. So the more you staked in a point, the more visible it becomes. If you don't care about your point being that visible, you could like withdraw your tokens, sure. But then if you have very little left behind, it's very easy for someone to challenge you. And yeah, it goes the other way, that the challenger, if they lose their tokens, and the candidate and the voters who voted correctly win tokens as well. So whenever a challenge occurs, there's like a binary, someone's gonna win, someone's gonna lose. Okay, maybe we'll just, for the sake of turning the conversation back to the upcoming token sale, if anyone had any questions. If not, maybe Harrison, we can just speak together, wrapping up why we're pursuing the sale in such a manner.
Sure.
Yeah, I can just say from our point of view, we've taken a lot of like pains in this regulatory environment to be able to launch a functional program protocol. And we're really just interested in having it be built out by users like everyone who's joined this call. And we're really excited to be on a platform like Token Foundry that kind of autonomously and from a smart contract point of view is even able to facilitate these things. And we're excited to be one of the first projects selling to US purchasers under this model.
Yep. I would just add, we are excited as well. We think this model will long-term be very beneficial to the health of the network and the project, and result in a much better token holder base from the start, which is critical, we think, to success and the launch. And we will definitely be putting out more content and some how-tos to make it very easy to understand what's going on and how to kind of adhere.
Where is Michael? Yeah.
All right, did someone have a question? Okay, I would just add, we are aware there are some issues with registration with just KYC generally on Token Foundry. So if you are having any issues registering, please reach out to us and we'll try to streamline that for you. But otherwise, prior to the 16th, we'll be adding more walkthroughs and information about proof of use and registration to make sure everything's clear.
I just kind of just want to add, I think we like missed the question about like local community groups. Maybe it would be good if Brandon can kind of like give an update.
Yeah, so if you guys are familiar with the Things Network, the long-term kind of goal is to have a page for each city so that everyone can kind of come together, collaborate, organize meetups, have a forum for discussion. And yeah, I think that they've built up a great community and they're a great model to work off of. So you can check out their website for kind of what our long-term plan for local communities will be.
And and we have a pipeline how to provide support to local groups, and we have the materials for the events. as well as we now have like different Telegram groups.
Yep, and the local communities are very important to grow our network as much as possible. So either join one if there's one existing or reach out to get one started.
Yeah, and I'll just also add that we have a lot of events coming up around the world. Starting tonight, there's a community event in Brooklyn and Bushwick. We have a community organized meetup happening in Melbourne, Australia, July 11th, and another one happening in Lisbon, Portugal, Friday the 13th. I'll also be presenting July 10th in Manhattan at the Token Engineering Workshop at Andreessen Horowitz's office with LivePeer. We also have some events with Arthur in Zurich at Microsoft Azure's offices, as well as the network meetup the 11th of July. And we have another event in Munich with RChain and an event the 18th in London. So if anyone is around, feel free to join. Cool, I just see a final question about the connection between Foam and the Things Network. There is no direct connection other than we've been reaching out to those communities and they've been reaching out to us. And they're really excited about this breathing new life for new ways to use those radios. But I'll just add that the MAC layer that the Things Network radios use are very restrictive. And so they don't really allow mesh networking or the level of precision we need for the Foam software. So we would have to be running a custom firmware. So there's not direct compatibility with the Things Network, but the actual hardware they use would be able to run. Okay, I think that I don't see any other questions at the moment. So thank you everyone for joining. Also, thank you, Harrison, for your time to help communicate to our community about Token Foundry.
Thank you, guys. Feel free to reach out with any more questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.